Hi, I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
And I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited to share that today's guest is Linda Korn, Senior Executive Producer at Penguin Random House. Linda, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We're going to dive right in because we're a podcast that likes to go deep quick. Question number one, when you are planning to cast an audiobook, how do you decide which narrators to invite to the audition out of the hundreds of narrators you know? What tells you that these are the voices to consider for this particular project?
So to start, first of all, I don't always host an audition. So very often I'm choosing from narrators that already have samples available of their work, whether it's on our casting database, Ahab Talent, or somewhere else on their website. But of course, you're right. There are thousands of voices. In fact, there's more than 13,000 actors from around the world that are currently have profiles on Ahab Talent, which is global, as I said, and it's not just casting for audiobooks. There's video games, ads, animation, documentaries, and stuff on there. So I'm getting access to so many voices. So how do I choose? There's so many different ways. I mean, sometimes there are actors that I know, obviously, that I've worked with before that come to mind, and I will keep them in the pot. And then I'll try to cast as wide of a net as I possibly can. Lately, that's what I'm trying to do, is just sort of open the door to all the possibilities and consider, who most closely connects with the content that I'm casting for. Whether it's a first person narrator, I want somebody authentically connected to the character that is telling the story. So I'm going to search, far and wide to find that specific person, whether it's someone who has the Arabic language skills, or, if it's a British narrator, if it's a BIPOC narrator, I want to be as authentic as possible. And then from that wide net, I have to do a lot of listening and begin to pare it down to someone that, obviously it's somewhat subjective, but I'm trying to keep an objective ear to see who is connecting with that text. If it is an audition, that makes it even easier because it becomes very apparent who's really bringing that tone, who has the author's intent in mind. And I just start narrowing it down. And then, of course, I do pick maybe, anywhere from 5 to 10, sometimes more, top selections in my mind, and I share those with the author, and then I get the author's input. So that really helps narrow it down, and together we choose the one that resonates with both of us, and it usually works out pretty well.
Wow, that sounds like it would both be an overwhelming process, but also a really exciting process, because especially at the beginning, you've got this huge wide net and you don't know where that's going to take you.
Right. And that's the exciting part. You don't know where it's going to take you. And it can be overwhelming. Sometimes when you host auditions, if you have an open audition, you get tons of submissions and you have to listen to all of them. But it's really exciting, to hear. I don't have to listen to an entire audition, I'll be frank, to get the feel. I can usually, having been in this industry for a very long time and kind of know what I'm listening for, I don't have to listen that long to decide, okay, I want to hear more and see if this is going where I think it's going, or no, this is not the voice that's connecting with me. And it's not just, the authenticity is the first part. And then there's it's the delivery. It's that certain flavor that is just says, this is a match. It's like making a love match in a lot of ways. You just kind of know when it's the right person. And there's more than one right choice. If somebody else was producing, they might pick someone else. I also collaborate a lot with my colleagues. We all ask each other, I'll say, I'm looking for, young adult narrator, and it's a wide open, it could be anybody, and we share ideas with each other because, like you said, there are so many people. So we find out who other people have worked with, and just try to keep digging for the right person, and also try to give opportunities to new narrators or narrators that I wouldn't ordinarily think of. And that pool is getting bigger and bigger, in a very exciting way.
I have a question about this sense that you have when you're like, this person is a match. Is it inevitable? Is it inevitable? Ineffable? Is it chemistry, like or is it instinctual, or is there something else you can articulate about when it's like, ooh, this is the one?
It is all of those. There is a lot of instinct in it, but it's also, I've learned to listen beyond my own ears, so to speak, beyond my own experience of what I think the narrator sounds like. So I think that takes some time and practice, but I hope, and I'm always becoming more and more objective, if I can get in the seat of the listener and say, what is this message of this book? What is the tone of this book? What does the author sound like? What is the author's voice on the page? What's the rhythm of that author? What are they trying to convey in this moment? What is the character feeling? And so it's not necessarily someone that I just want to listen to. It's someone that is translating something for me, translating the author's message, translating and delivering something truthful. And that is not necessarily something I can articulate, but I think when something's true and when it's not. And so, and then it comes down to a handful of people that can really do that for that book. And then it's just a matter, and that's why it's really nice to collaborate with the author, because they're so close to it, and they're like, this is exactly what I imagined in my mind. This person, they know this tone in this book and this story so well. They're like, yes. And it's a very exciting thing for me. One of my favorite things is like when my vision matches the author's, I'm like, I got it. It's like winning the lottery, or, winning those games where you have to pull the stuffed animal out of the thing. Yes. And you caught it. It's like, you got it. So.
Oh, what a beautiful, thoughtful process. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, I love that image. Well, I would love to know, of the books that you have cast, could you share one book that you think is an example of truly stellar narration and why you think it's so special?
So, yes, I'm happy to do that, but I'm going to give you two books. And I'll make them fast. I'm going to break the rules, right? It's all about getting outside the box, because I think it's really hard to pick. There's so many different genres, and I think we're very often drawn, or I'm often drawn, like when I think, what's like a book that the narrator was so amazing, and I'll pick like a complicated, a literary book or something really dramatic, right? Where the narrator really has to do a ton of kind of research and dig in and bring something really meaningful. But then there's like these very lighthearted, wonderful books and kids' books and YA books that are like so beautifully done. And that takes a tremendous amount of skill. So that's what I'm going to do. I picked a children's audiobook or like a middle grade children's audiobook and a more literary type, historical fiction / romance. So I'll do that one first. The Davenports by Crystal Marquis, I cast Jonice Abbott Pratt to narrate this wonderful novel. And I think this is the first book that I worked with Jonice on. And what she does is really extraordinary. And I happened to catch that this was one of her favorite books to narrate. And it really shows because this is a third person, like a close third person narrative that has 4 main characters that are all falling in love and crisscross. And there's this message of forging your own path. It's also a message of, history. This is centers around a Black wealthy family in 1910 in Chicago. And so navigating that world and the racism that the characters experience, even though they are part of a very elite set in Chicago at the time, Jonice really had to straddle so many themes and so many characters and so many points of view and shifting perspectives and tones, and layers. And she does this. It sounds effortless. If you listen to it, even just a clip, you can tell, oh my gosh, she really has the elite circle down, but then she has the vulnerability underneath. And then the romantic aspects she handles with such grace. And it's, I don't know, it's just extraordinary. One of the most important things that I love in audiobook narration is capturing tone. And when you have third person narrative and you have shifting perspectives, the tone is changing constantly, right? Because each character, each scene has their own point of view and tone and perspective, and knowing where those shifts happen in the text really lifts a narrator into like a top level range of narrating audiobooks. Yeah. And I think that that's what she accomplishes. It's a beautiful listen. It's actually not an audiobook. It's probably not a book that I personally would be naturally drawn to, yet I'm listening to it right now because it came out recently. And I love it so much. There's so much richness in it and so much more to the story than you would imagine from the description. And I think that comes from Jonice because she brings not only the author's intent, but she brings herself to it. She gives herself to the story and creates these characters, pops them off the page.
Oh, that's so amazing. I had the good fortune of co-narrating a title with Jonice several years ago, and the process of working on the character voices with her was just incredible. The way that she really dug into the deep understanding of who these characters were as people, like separate from the genre, separate from what happened in the book, who the characters were as people. And it definitely really influenced me as a narrator. And the way that you're talking about this book, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that January Lavoie always says that I carry with me. She says, we're not creating characters, we're creating people. So you're not just creating a voice. And I think Jonice also has tapped into that and talks about that she carries not just the voice that she's created for the character or kind of the tone, but the emotional life of that person. So that's what you're describing. Yeah, it's great. And the other one is this wonderful series called, it's a series called The Underdogs, and they're a group of doggy detectives, and they let a cat into their agency, which I just love because that's, so inclusive.
That is so fun.
Right. And right. Even if you're a cat, you can be a dog, or an underdog at least. And the series narrator is Alexandra Ryan. And she just blows us away. It's so much, she makes so much of it. And what I would love about what she does is that obviously she has a lot of fun and plays with the voices and the accents of these characters and always asks, is it okay to bring this accent in for this character? And we work with the authors who are Kate and Joel Temple to, make sure we're treating their vision appropriately. And they love Alexandra too. And what I love about what she does, and I've told her, is that she's not just having fun with it, although she creates this amazing Mick Jagger voice, not Jagger, Mick Wagger.
Oh my gosh. Gotta love the puns.
You gotta love, it's all full of puns, but while it's so hysterically funny, she also she takes the characters seriously, so that they're real. These dogs are real, and they are working always against the odds, and they are the underdogs. There's always an agency that's much more famous than them, and everybody thinks is going to solve the case, but the underdogs come and they figure it out, and you're always rooting for them. And it's a kid's book and it's light and sweet, but I think taking these messages seriously, but not like overly seriously, but seriously in the event that they're real. And these are real situations, and just brings the characters and the story to life, just like your favorite cartoons of old. And I think she's just extraordinary. And so much so that I've mostly worked with her in this like animation and children's storytelling genre, but I hear in her voice so much nuance and so much capability that I can't wait to cast her in an adult fiction. And I've told her this, and I think that's, really exciting that we don't need to pigeonhole narrators into one genre, even when they're so amazing at it. You can hear when someone is really great that they have a wide range, like Alexandra. So that was fun.
That's lovely.
I'm so happy you picked those two different examples. That was so rich to listen to what these two different narrators did so well on these two different genres. And it's also funny for me that you picked the Underdog Detective Agency, because I actually auditioned for that book. And that book to me is a beautiful example of how we each, there is no competition because we are each meant to book the books that are for us. When I saw Alexandra had booked that one, I was like, yeah. And then I happen to know there's a book that is one of my favorites that I've done that I happen to know that Alexandra auditioned for, So to me, that's that beautiful example of there is no competition because we each book the book. As you were talking about, in answer to the first question, that there's just something where it's that essence was a match and it's a go,
I'm so glad you shared that. That's really true. And now I remember that. I forgot about that, Sarah, but I did think of you. And again, that just comes down to the moment and something that captured the author's ears. And that's pretty cool. You're exactly right. You book the thing you're supposed to get. And, and to come back to casting, I think the exciting thing about casting for us at PRH is, AHEP Talent has exposed us to so many narrators we would never be able to find. And so that's the other thing. You don't even know who. Sometimes you don't even know who you're auditioning with, right? If you're auditioning for something, and there's people all over the world that just might, pop in there and be the exact right thing. So that's kind of cool.
What about the art of audiobooks draws you in the most? What aspect do you find the most compelling?
What draws me in to audiobooks and what I love about my work is the power of the human voice. I love reading. I love stories, but I think what has always been the entry point for me is the voice. I'm the other 3/4 of me is a musician. I came in as a musician. I play piano and I sing and I love music. And to me, every story is a long song. And the way, and I'm into instruments. So I just get super nerdy excited about what the voice is capable of and how a voice can reach another person. And, I've heard from narrators some of the fan mail that they get and the way that they've touched listeners, or the thing that I feel when someone is telling a story or talking to me, and, you get goosebumps on your arms, or you just feel really happy or great. That is what continues to draw me in. And I think the voice is more than just a sound that we project, but it's connected to who we are. It's connected, like, not to be too weird, but like connected to our souls. And the deeper I get into that, the more I learn about that, the more it draws me in, because I've seen what narrators themselves have experienced in the booth when they're reading a difficult passage or a really emotional passage, how that affects their voice and their ability to bring the voice that they're trying to bring. It's like a whole mind-body connection. And I don't know if everyone walks with the understanding of how powerful their own voice is.
What wise
Beautifully,
words.
beautifully said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was beautiful. Absolutely. Well, we are on to our last question already, which is a question that all three of us will answer. But Linda, I would love to know your thoughts first. And the question is this: what is exciting you right now, today, about the craft of audiobooks? Linda?
I think that you can probably guess by the way I've been answering the other questions, but I think it is really the most exciting thing for me personally is the diversity that continues to just grow. And I think is at a boiling point right now where it's just beginning to overflow. And there's so much excitement around what we can do in audiobooks. It's in every aspect of audiobook production. It starts with the book and the diverse voices that are being published more and more and more. And not just different global and different of writers from different communities and cultures, but also the form in which they're writing. So the writing form continues to explode in diversity, and you see things that you start to see audiobooks created out of books we would never have considered, 15 years ago as an audiobook. The graphic novels, cookbooks, even some coffee table books, things that you wouldn't think would make an audiobook. We figure out a way to do them, and I think that that's really, really exciting because we're creating access to books for everyone. And we're also expanding and kind of testing the boundaries of creativity and how to utilize voice, the power of voice to tell a story. even a story that is in another form told through mostly visuals. So I think that's really exciting, that just just the types of productions, multi-voice, single voice doing interesting things, and obviously expanding our narrator pool to include, so much diversity in audiobooks, to people that, might not have had access to these opportunities before. And, one of the ways we do that, obviously, in narration is also through AHAB, but also we have a narrator mentorship program, where new narrators are selected from thousands of applicants. And we've had, I think, 50 so far, since 2021. And they spend 6 months with a producer, developing a close relationship and learning about the craft of audiobooks, as a narrator, and both the business of audiobooks. And I just think that's super exciting, because the best thing we can do, just like you're doing with this podcast, is we get excited about something and then we help others. We teach others, and kind of hand it down to the next generation.
Absolutely. And I love that you highlighted the variety of forms that audiobooks are taking these days. I also find that very exciting. Just, a book that maybe in the past might have just been single voiced is now able to be multicast in a way that really serves the material better. Mm-hmm. Or a, normal single voice narration that is still just absolutely beautiful and stellar. I think it's neat that every book is being considered as to what the book needs, rather than here's what we do. And so we're doing it this way because that's the way we do everything. Attention exactly. to individual needs of the project.
Yeah. Yeah. And the push for creativity, because, once an industry like ours explodes the way it has over the last several years, it boosts the need for creativity and innovation. So I think that's where we all are right now, because we're competing in a very, very large space. And, we all want to do exciting things and new things with audiobooks, because a lot of people are listening, and we want to keep them entertained and informed and educated and excited.
Well, Sarah, what about you? What is exciting you about the craft of audiobooks today?
Well, I am continuing to reflect on the discomfort I feel about the fact that future me will always be able to do the book I'm recording better than current me can do. And, Gail said something really wise. Gail Shallen said something really wise in our interview with her, which is like, I hope I'm always growing like that. I hope that's the case, which is very wise. And I still feel uncomfortable about it, because I care about the book so much. I want to do such a good job. And because it can be very challenging to accept that I'm going to be witnessed, in my imperfection. And what's exciting me today is it occurred to me that, wait a minute, but that's the beauty, is being witnessed in the imperfection, because perfection is stagnant. It's like marble or granite. And that's not what we as artists and humans are here to do. We're ever evolving. And the true value I bring my work is not the advancement of my craft is very important, but the most valuable thing I bring is the essence of my soul. And that is something that I can bring forth right here, right now, regardless of my craft level. So connecting to that as a way to escape the part of my brain that's like, but I'm not perfect, and you'll see it, and I want the book to be perfect because I care so much, is what is exciting me today.
I love that.
That is delightful. Yeah. This isn't my answer, but I've actually been thinking about that a little bit as well. Our most recent interview was with Gail Shallen, and she had so many gems of wisdom that have really stuck with me from that conversation. And one of them was the same one that you said, Sarah. And I've just been thinking about how who I am today is not who I'm going to be tomorrow. So who I am today is narrating this book, not me from a week from now, and not me from a week prior. Who I am today is who's narrating this book. And so I bring all of that version of myself and do the best that you can.
That's great. It somehow reminds me of sand art. Like some artists will make art in the sand and then the ocean washes it away.
Right.
And I can't even articulate quite why it reminds me of that, because like it's actually the opposite, right? Like I narrate in my today Sarah self, and then it's permanent forever. That's the audiobook. So it's like the opposite of sand art in a way. And yet the experience of the narration feels like the sand art, just accepting like this is the movement today. And that is all that there is, the end,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that so much, because while we focus on finding what I called like the perfect match, that doesn't mean the voice is perfect. And I think, or that every word is going to be perfect. The beauty, the truth that we're looking for is that imperfection, that unforced perfection, that it's you're just in the moment. Like you said, it's a snapshot, right? It's a snapshot of the time. Like we look at photographs, and that's, in that moment. And then we're something else as we move on. But that moment is so precious. So I think you're absolutely right. That's just just to be really present and bring all you have in that day and to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's the being comfortable with it that's hard sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing, because it keeps you, especially today when there's a lot of narrators reading audiobooks on their own in their booths without a director present to say, that's great, move on. You've done that, because I imagine what you were describing, Sarah, that voice in your head that's like, wait, you could do that better. Like, do that line again, or do that paragraph, or wait, start over, and it takes a lot of practice and confidence mixed with humility to know that, it's great as it is. And I can move on, because, you have a whole, a whole book to finish. And also just, sometimes that spontaneity is captured so beautifully. And it's like, no, don't take it again. A lot of times I say that, like, if I am in the studio with someone and they're like, I said, you know what, just don't take it again. It was so great. And I don't want the editor to accidentally choose the wrong day. Like, it cannot be better. Sometimes there's something so imperfectly wonderful about it.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because as you said that, it occurred to me too, like each narrator is never going to be the best judge of their, like, if what we're trying to do is bring the essence of our souls, as narrators, we're going to get in our heads and get in the way of that. And that our job as home narrators is to just trust it as much, keep leaning into the trust of like, my soul is here to do this. It is not about perfection, because otherwise we're just going to F it up.
Right. And
Yeah.
It's not about, if I was a narrator, it's not about, and I've been in the narrator seat for a couple of times, and it's, really intense. And it would be not about me at that moment, right? It's about the story. And it's just, if you're enjoying it and you're connecting, then your listener is connecting to you, and you're gonna, you can't please everyone all the time. The old adage is nothing more true in narration, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. That's a really juicy thought to think about. I want to share my thoughts now. So, what I'm excited about with the craft of audiobooks right now has a lot more to do with the technical, like narrator toolbox side of things. Right now I'm listening to A Year to the Day by Robin Benway, which Sarah narrated. And I asked her for a recommendation for something that she's narrated. And I listened to it initially because I was going on vacation and wanted to take Sarah's voice along with me. But it's turned into a lot more than that, because in this audiobook, it's a YA book, but it deals really heavy themes, grief primarily, the loss of a very, very close loved one. And Sarah uses changes in pacing and pauses so effectively in this book, because it is a book about grief and it's about processing the loss of a loved one. So the pace could get very static and pretty slow and a little bit plodding. And while the pace of this book overall is relatively slow, there are those moments where she ups the pace just enough to keep it interesting as a listener. So I'm never going to like fall asleep to it. I'm staying engaged. And then on top of that, there are moments where she just lets the words rest. So it could be a pregnant pause. It could be a gentle pause. It could be a hesitant pause. I mean, there's all sorts of types of pauses, and Sarah is using all of them. And it's really making me think about how pacing and pauses influence the way we tell stories and also shape the listener's perception. Using a pause to allow the listener to process what they've just heard, what's just happened in the story, what the characters have just said, or increasing the pace so that the listener is more engaged, or slowing the pace down so the listener has time to really understand the subtext of those words. Sort of like you said earlier, Linda, we are more than our voices. Yes, we communicate with the sound of our voices and the sound of the author's words, but we can also communicate in the speed of those words and then the pauses between the words. That silence is just as expressive as sound. And so just thinking about those tools in the narrator's toolbox, I've been really pondering that a lot recently.
Thank you, Jennifer. That book is to me, it is so beautifully written. That is one of my favorite books I've ever encountered, let alone had the great pleasure of narrating. And what you're describing, the text told me to do it,
Yeah. So following the author's guidance.
Also, it's very validating because I feel very strongly about that book. And a prominent review came out that was like, oh, the narration was okay. It was a little slow. And I was like, slow? It was about grief. So I inside was like, I think I respectfully disagree. And so it feels I feel very validated. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I would also disagree with with the description of that particular narration being slow. It is slow in places where it needs to be slow, but it's also brisker in places where it needs to be. So
thank you.
I think the pacing is brilliantly done.
Case in point, what I was saying, you're not going to please everybody all the time.
For sure.
And I think, I'm so glad you said that, Sarah, that the text told you to do it, because I think that's also one of the things, such a great skill to be able to read the text as and detect the clues as a narrator of the pace. Where are the commas, and using punctuation or italics, or all the form in which the author writes and the words that they use are all informing you, right? How to tell it, at what pace, at what level of energy and connection and intensity, and where you're being funny and where you're being serious. And it's just all there in the text. I think narrators share a lot of tools with writers. The same tools the writers use to write are the tools we connect to, or narrators connect to as storytellers.
Absolutely. Well, that is our discussion today. Linda, thank you so much. It has truly been an absolute delight to talk with you today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your thoughts. And Sarah, as always, it is a pleasure co-hosting with you. So thank you so much for being here for this episode of Crafting Audiobooks.
Thank you both. So wonderful.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Jennifer Jill Araya
and Sarah Beth Goer,
wishing you happy audiobook listening and/or crafting.
Bye for now.